All right, coming to you live from DevOps Days Austin, here at the UT Stadium, where most DevOps things are usually held, obviously. I'm sitting here with Michael Cote from Pivotal Labs. How are you doing, Michael?
I'm doing great.
All right. So you just gave a talk about DevOps for normal. I'm sort of paraphrasing that. But can you just give a high-level first overview before we double-click?
Sure. Well, I've spoken a lot of DevOps Days, and the thing that's sort of new about this talk is I don't know why I threw it. I've spoken a lot of DevOps Days there. But the thing that's new about this is over the past year, most all of the end users or customers or normals that I've talked and spoken with have been in large organizations, whether they're governments or corporations, and they're very much so interested in not only DevOps but doing cloud and doing things in like the unicorny way. And the problems that they have, the roadblocks, the barriers, the malaise in their mind are not exactly the same things that I see in smaller organizations or even technology companies. They have a different set of problems. And so I use the 30 minutes that I was given here to kind of just go over like, what's up with those people? How would you characterize them? Also, what's a good definition of DevOps that we have that's useful? Because these people also, they basically want a manual. Like, I remember sitting with one of them, a group of managers at one of these large organizations, and they asked in several different ways, like, oh, this sounds great. Do you have a manual for it? And one of them even said, like, do you have, like, like those, it would kind of be like, those little laminated cards that you put on there. And it's easy for us in the tech world to kind of like scoff at that, because it's kind of like, oh, how can you put the, something so holy and sacrosanct kind of little card? But the point is more that if you understand something well enough that you can reduce it down to a card, then one, you understand it and it's actually reliable in a thing, right? So anyways, I find at these large organizations that they want a better idea of what DevOps is and what cloud is and cloud native. So I kind of went over a good definition of that exists thanks to the DevOps report. And then the last part was basically just going over in large organizations, what are problems and ways of approaching DevOps that are particular to large organizations that are worth pointing out for them. Because just wrapping up this long answer to your short question, also in the DevOps study, when you go, they did some extra studying and they found that organizations that were 10,000 plus people, there was only 40% of them that fit into this high-performing category of companies. So to summarize that, it was harder for very large organizations to get to be high-performing organizations and do the DevOps, as it were, than for smaller organizations. So I think it's worth looking at why that is and how we can help larger organizations out.
So actually, one thing within the one slide you had that I really liked was sort of a DevOps continuum, DevOps described by the tools. So today it's all about container mania. I think you had before that you had your Ansibles, your Puppets, your Chefs, and that was sort of what people took away as DevOps.
Sure.
And then you had a last one. And maybe you could just talk about that last one.
Yeah. So in the middle section where I'm trying to say like what's a not a manual because you only have 30 minutes, but what's a good working definition you can go look up of DevOps. I was saying that for a long time we defined DevOps by the tools that were in use, and I would go out and talk with people. This is back when I was an analyst, and I would consult mostly with vendors about what you should do product-wise and how you should be responding to DevOps. And many of them would say, to use a thing we've been joking about literally, like they would say, oh, well, DevOps is just using Puppet and Chef. And this, I think, was a pretty prevailing attitude, that if you were using Puppet or Chef and maybe AWS, that was kind of implicit that was doing DevOps, right? And then, like you were saying, I think we're still kind of in this era where people think if I'm doing things if I'm using containers to package up and deploy and run my applications, then that's doing DevOps. And of course, like even Docker themselves have products that are way beyond containers, and you find that one of the people on my team at Pivotal, Bridget, and she gives a good talk about containers aren't going to save your bacon. She has much better phrasing for it, but she's actually run containers in production, and there's a whole lot of other stuff. It's not going to fix your process. There's many other things that come into play to be successful at software, whether you're using containers or not. So the whole point is that, and this is especially at large organizations who are desperate for a manual, they're very susceptible to defining something by using a technology, right? And that's a big thing you got to avoid, is like, just because you're using some technology does not mean you are doing DevOps or Agile, and therefore does not in any way guarantee or predict that you're going to get the benefits of it, right? Those benefits being faster delivery cycle that leads to better overall software that hopefully leads to a business that people want to come to and stay with and spend more money with.
Awesome. So where would you throw the culture in this? And then that's what everybody says. It's not the tools, it's the culture. Like you said, people
Sure.
can identify, they can buy tools, but culture. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things. One is I try to avoid using the word culture except when I want to make fun of it, as you were kind of very subtly doing. And instead I use the word process, right? Because I think we can all agree that process is not like a BS term. Process is sort of like, as a group of people who've come together to accomplish some task other than binge watching the new House of Cards seasons, what process will we follow to accomplish this, right? Like, we kind of concede that we're going to act as a group to do something, like whether you're a business or a government or whatever, and we need a process that allows all of us to coordinate. And a lot of that process is something you can write down, like we're here at a stadium, right? Like they have a process for how they do football and whatever it is they do, like there's a process behind it. But then, to a certain extent, there also is a cultural part. And I more think of it as the mindset that you have, particularly that management has, and how they prove that mindset, a mindset of innovation and exploration, and not so much that failure being okay, but it's okay to have a learning culture, right? And management's job in defining the culture is to use the levers they have, which is basically like management ultimately has like maybe 3 or 4 levels, like firing people, giving people more money, or not firing people. And then sometimes they can give like rousing speeches, right? And but basically they can dispense resources and control them. And so it's management's job to think about the culture that they need for whatever it is they're achieving. See, I'm using that word, right? But like, if you want to have innovative new software that you're always developing that helps you run your business differently, right? So if you're freaked out about like Uber or Google or all these people, and you're like, we got to have some software. Like right now we're just paper and like we just use some ERP thing, but we need some custom software, a mobile app. Like you need to understand how software works and build up the type of organization, the culture that does that. And that's probably, if you're not used to that, going to require a different management technique and different incentives and different ways of going about things across those 4 or so levers that I went over, right? Like if your developers write some mobile app and it's like a failure in the first week, you don't just fire them all, right? Like you have them go back and work on it and solve that problem again and so forth and so on.
Awesome. Michael Cote, thank you so much.
Sure.